Good afternoon. Welcome to the Surrendered and Abandoned Vessel Exchange Grant Application Workshop for 2021. We call this program SAVE. My name is Ron Kent. I manage the SAVE program for California State Parks, Division of Boating and Waterways, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our webpage for future reference. Everyone is muted during the presentation. Please write your questions in the chat and we will address those at the end of the presentation. The purpose of the SAVE grant is to remove, reduce, and prevent recreational vessels from polluting our waterways and/or creating navigational hazards. The grants are authorized by Harbors and Navigation Code, Section 525. Funding is available to local public agencies for the removal and disposal of abandoned recreational vessels and disposal of surrendered recreational vessels, and for the removal of partially submerged objects that pose a substantial hazard to navigation. Harbors and Navigation Code 522 defines an abandoned vessel as any derelict, wreck, or part of a watercraft that is sunk, beached, or is in an unseaworthy condition in or adjacent to a publicly owned navigable waterway. I want to point out the term, quote, adjacent to publicly owned navigable waterways, unquote. DBW considers this to be a vessel that could enter the water from a high tide in coastal regions or the Delta to high water flows in a river from spring runoff, snowmelt, or other high water flow occurrence. Vessels abandoned on the road, in a yard, at a business, or on private property not adjacent to navigable public waterways is not eligible for SAVE. HNC 526.1 identifies that a surrendered vessel must be turned in by the verified registered owner, and the receiving agency has determined that the vessel is in danger of becoming abandoned if not surrendered. I'll talk more about verified registered owner later in the presentation. Harbors and Navigation Code 525.1a also states that SAVE funding can be used for removal of any other partially submerged objects that pose a substantial hazard to navigation. Reimbursement from SAVE for removal of partially submerged objects requires DBW prior approval. I want to point out a common misconception regarding Harbors and Navigation Code 550 and 551. It does state that local agencies that have jurisdiction may immediately remove marine debris that is a hazard to navigation, a public nuisance, or a danger to health, safety, or the environment. These codes identify your authority. They do not state that SAVE funding may be used to cover the cost. Your agency's Submerged Navigation Hazard Abatement Plan, or SNAP, should provide you guidance for handling these types of situations and how your agency will fund them. We will discuss SNAP further during the application portion of the presentation. In summary, here's a brief checklist to determine if vessels or objects can be surrendered or abandoned with the SAVE grant. For each scenario, all items need to be checked. Abandoned vessels must be recreational vessels and in or adjacent to a publicly owned navigable waterway. Surrendered vessels, again, recreational, and surrendered by the registered owner, and it is in danger of becoming abandoned. Partially submerged objects are partially submerged and pose a substantial threat to navigation. Vessels abandoned on the road, in a parking lot, on private property, etc., cannot be removed or destroyed with funding from this program. Commercial vessels cannot be removed and or destroyed under any circumstances with this funding. If you are awarded a grant, it is important to note that only vessels meeting these definitions are eligible to be disposed of with SAVE funding. Grant applications must be submitted using DBW's online grant application system, also known as OLGA. OLGA can be accessed directly from the SAVE webpage or DBW's Grants and Loans homepage using the link provided on this slide. Once on the page, there will be a green box on the right sidebar that includes the link to OLGA and a link to a 45-minute OLGA instruction webinar that I highly recommend you watch. Once you're signed in to OLGA, remember, you are applying for the SAVE 21 grant program. The application is now open and the deadline to submit your SAVE 21 application is April 30th, 2021 at 5 p.m. SAVE application questions are primarily yes or no and multiple choice. Some questions require a brief explanation. These fields have character limits, so you'll need to be concise. Scoring for each question is designed to weigh the responses according to the objectives of Harbors and Navigation Code 525. Scores are weighted as follows: prevention 20%, control 20%, cost efficiency 20%, existence of an active enforcement program. Your SNAP plan is 15%, and risk assessment of the applicant is 10%. Next, we will cover key components in the application that will be used to assess your agency's ability to meet the SAVE grant priorities. There are two minimum qualifications, and both must be met to be eligible for funding. They are having an active enforcement program and having authority to tag and remove abandoned vessels. The application requires that you upload the local ordinance or resolution that provides this authority. DBW encourages that grantees promote and receive surrendered vessels in an effort to reduce the high cost associated with disposal of abandoned vessels. Several questions are designed to determine the level at which your agency encourages boat owners to utilize the surrendered vessel option. The questions will include topics like how often you visit marinas in your area of responsibility. Do you pass out flyers and literature while on patrol? Do you attend local events in an effort to reach out to boaters? DBW is encouraging SAVE grantees to find ways to provide maximum cost efficiency. Some ideas for accomplishing cost efficiency include destroying multiple vessels at one time, working with marinas who can accommodate on-site destruction, finding ways for hauling vessels directly to the landfills, and making arrangements for surrendered vessels to be delivered to the landfills by the owner. 15% of available points are from questions assessing the agency's SNAP plan. A well-written SNAP will address strategies for prevention of abandoned vessels and methods for removal of not only vessels, but, as we discussed earlier, any navigational hazards such as submerged objects, logs, abandoned piers, vehicles, etc., which are not eligible for reimbursement using SAVE. You will need to upload your SNAP to the application. Points will be assigned according to the quality and thoroughness of the plan. Budget worksheet. The application includes a budget detail worksheet. You will first list the vessels you currently have identified that have been abandoned and those you know will be surrendered, and estimate the cost of processing each vessel through destruction. Next, you will estimate the number and cost of disposal of additional future vessels you anticipate removing or receiving over the life of a grant, approximately 2 years. This estimate could be based on past performance and records, current records of vessels that are being monitored, and/or a list of owners that have contacted you wanting to surrender their vessels. The budget worksheet requires that you provide justification to support these estimates. Total number request plus 10% match will equal total project cost. These totals must match the amounts requested on page 1 of the application, or you will get an OLGA error when you validate. Keep in mind that applications will be reviewed and scored by teams of independent reviewers who do not work within the SAVE program. This promotes equity and transparency in the award process. For applications received from applicants who have had a SAVE grant during any of the past 3 grant cycles, the SAVE program manager will prepare a brief assessment of the applicant's past performance in terms of managing their SAVE grant, including submission of accurate reimbursement request packages and responding to requests for additional information or revision of inaccurately submitted reimbursement requests. This is the risk assessment category and is worth up to 10 points. Agencies with a history of submitting incomplete, inaccurate reimbursement requests or not following guidance provided in the grant agreement and fully executed letter may receive lower scores. Once awards are determined, OLGA will generate either a denial letter or a notification of award and instructions for executing the grant agreement. Your agency may not get everything it asks for, as there is a tremendous need across the state. Additionally, as stated before, your agency may receive award amounts based on past performance. Work performed before the agreement is executed will not be reimbursed. So do not begin work related to the award at this point, as you do not have a fully executed agreement yet. OLGA emails notification and grant awards to the person that submitted the application. If that person leaves your agency, please notify DBW right away so we can update our records. The award notification has specific instructions on downloading a copy of the grant agreement and where it needs to be signed and/or initialed, as well as the need for a resolution from your agency's governing body, providing authorization to accept and sign the grant agreement. Make sure that the person and/or title listed in the resolution is the person that signs the agreement. Once we receive the signed agreement with all signature initials necessary and the resolution, we will process the documents through DBW and upload the fully executed agreement into OLGA. OLGA will then email a notice of fully executed agreement and instruction letter to the same person that applied for the grant. This is the authorization that you may begin work. Reimbursement requests. The 2 lists on the side show exactly what expenses are eligible to be reimbursed with SAVE funding. Abandoned vessel eligible expenses: raising of submerged vessels, hazardous material removal and disposal, towing, storage up to 90 days, lien sale expenses, vessel appraisal, and vessel salvage and demolition. For surrendered vessels, eligible expenses are hazardous material removal and disposal, towing from agency to the landfill, and demolition. I want to talk a little more about some of the items listed here. For example, raising of submerged vessels. Before raising a fully submerged vessel, you should seek prior approval from DBW. There are many factors to be considered. For example, is the vessel several feet below the surface and only a small portion is creating a hazard? It may be feasible to remove just this section at a fraction of the cost rather than remove the entire vessel. Towing. Make it a habit to consult DNB before authorizing an expensive tow. Abandoned vessels may not need to be towed, and some can be safely sunk. And to remind you, the grant can only pay for towing from your possession to the landfill. If you authorize a tow company to go get a vessel that's going to be surrendered, the grant will not pay for that tow. Your agency would be responsible for paying that tow company. Consult DBW before taking on an expense your agency may not get reimbursed for. Storage. We'll pay up to 60 days without a lien sale. If it's stored at your facility, we'll do 50% of your posted rates. If you have a lien sale, we'll pay for 90 days. Again, if it's stored at your facility, that'll be 50% of your posted rates. If you're using a contractor facility, we'll pay full rates, but it'll be for the 60 and 90-day time periods. Salvage and demolition. DBW requires that you provide us with a copy of the contracts you have with your salvage and demolition vendors. This requirement is in our agreement, Exhibit B, Item 10. Please send me a copy of these contracts once they are signed by all parties. SAVE grantees are responsible for properly notifying DMV and Coast Guard of all vessels they destroy. Again, it's important to go through this checklist for each vessel you remove or vessel that is surrendered to you. I'm going to read it one more time. Abandoned vessels, recreational vessels, and interadjacent to a publicly owned navigable waterway. Surrendered vessels, they have to be recreational vessels, surrendered by the registered owner and is in danger of becoming abandoned. Partially submerged objects are partially submerged and pose a substantial threat to navigation. Abandoned recreational watercraft reimbursement claim form. This is a copy of the current abandoned recreational watercraft reimbursement claim form. Old versions will not be accepted, so be sure to download this current version. There are several DBW only boxes. In the upper right-hand corner is a PO and invoice number box. In the lower right, there's a signature box for claim reviewers. The remaining boxes are to be filled out by your agency. Entries should be in date order. Name and description of vessel with CF number, when available, must match the description from the contractor salvager's invoice. One vessel per line. If the request is for more than 10 vessels and multiple claim forms are needed, carry the total from one page to the next. Put the grand total on the last page and include the total match on the last page. We are not requiring or requesting a cover page with the reimbursement request. The agency signature line states that the person signing the claim form is attesting to the fact that every vessel listed has been destroyed. List only vessels that have been destroyed. Abandoned recreational watercraft reimbursement claim form documents. Invoices. Your vendor's invoice must include the location of the vessel, the date work was completed, the vessel CF number, or other identifier that matches the description you enter on the claim form. Proof of payment. Acceptable proof of payment will be identified in your grant agreement. Only provide one proof of payment. Do not include your agency's internal accounting documents or other paperwork beyond what DBW requires, as this only delays payment process. This example shows an invoice that serves as an acceptable invoice and proof of payment. It has all the items needed for an invoice and shows a zero balance due. A zero balance due is one of the acceptable forms of proof of payment. Photos. Photos are required. You will not be reimbursed for a vessel without a photo of the vessel. The photo must show a CF number or identifier that matches the description box of the claim form. Again, this information must match the vendor's invoice. Ideally, the photo will show the condition and location of the vessel prior to removal. While a photo depicting the vessel is being destroyed is the best evidence for auditing purposes, we no longer stop payment if you do not provide one. The signature at the bottom of the claim form requires that you certify, upon penalty of perjury, that all vessels have been destroyed. Agencies do not need to include their internal title search documents in the reimbursement request. This includes reports, DMV title search, or emails related to the abandoned vessel. However, you must keep these documents on file per your agency's record-keeping policies. Surrendered Recreational Watercraft Reimbursement Claim Form. This is a copy of the revised Surrendered Recreational Watercraft Reimbursement Claim Form. There are several DBW-only boxes. In the upper right is the PO and invoice numbers. In the lower right is the signature box for claim reviewers. The remaining boxes are filled out by your agency. Entries should be in date order, name and description of vessel with CF must match the description from the contractor salvager invoice. One vessel per line. If the request is more than 10 vessels and multiple claim forms are needed, carry the total from one page to the next. Put the grand total on the last page and include the total match on the last page. Again, we are not requiring or requesting a cover page with the reimbursement request. The agency signature line states that the person signing the claim form is attesting to the fact that every vessel listed on the form has been destroyed. List only vessels that have been destroyed. Surrendered Recreational Watercraft Reimbursement Claim Form documents. Reimbursement requests for surrendered vessels require all the same documents as the abandoned vessel reimbursements, but also require that you submit verified owner title documents and the revised release of interest ownership form. Acceptable verified title documents. These will be a pink slip or DMV Form 138 signed by the person listed as the owner, or DMV registration with information that matches the information on the photo ID of the person surrendering the vessel. The DMV registration does not have to be up to date. We will also accept a DMV issued junk slip with information that matches the information on the photo ID of the person surrendering the vessel. Additionally, we will accept a vessel surrendered by a person with power of attorney or executor in the case of a vessel left by deceased. Marina owner-operators that wish to surrender vessels abandoned in their marina must gain interest or title of the vessel. The agency receiving the surrendered vessel must confirm that the marina has obtained title or interest through a lien or DMV. The revised release of interest and ownership form must be filled out completely with ID information of the person surrendering the vessel. including address, California driver's license, or other contact information the person surrendering the vessel. Do not submit original documents or copies of California driver's license or other documents not required from DBW. Here's a sample of the revised vessel release of interest and ownership form. This document can be downloaded from Volga. You can choose to create your own version on your agency's letterhead. You must send it to DBW and request that we review and approve it prior to your use. Agencies that have been using their older versions must submit a request and obtain approval to use the revised vessel release of interest and ownership form. To remind you, there is a 10% match requirement. Here is a sample of the InKind Match contribution form, which is available in Olga. On this form, activities being claimed must be listed in date order, only one staff per row, and only one vessel per row. If you are claiming in kind for 3 staff who worked on the same vessels, you will need to use 3 separate rows to account for each person's time. The activities being claimed for in-kind match must have occurred within your grant agreement term. If you're using personnel time, you can only claim direct wages, and DBW will require proof of hourly rates. Harbors and Navigation Code 525 also clearly states that it is illegal to abandon a vessel except for the immediate concern for the safety of those aboard. Abandoning a vessel is an infraction that can cost the last registered owner up to $3,000 in addition to reimbursement for the cost of removing and disposal of the vessel. A person shall not abandon a vessel upon a public waterway. Last registered owner is responsible for abandonment and is thereby liable for the cost of removal and disposition of the vessel. The court may order the last registered owner to pay to the agency that removes and disposes of the vessel the actual cost incurred by the agency for that removal and disposition. DBW will be exploring options for upholding this section of Harbors and Navigation Code and will be encouraging input from our SAVE grantees. This concludes my presentation. This is my contact information and a reminder that the application is now open in Olga and will close at 5 o'clock on April 30th, 2021. Please note that I am the best contact if you need assistance with Olga or any other program-related information. We will now open the chat function to accept questions. If you do not have access to chat, feel free to email me at the email shown on the slide. And now we're going to open this up for questions. Are there any questions, Ethan? You got any there?
No, not yet.
Okay. We'll give it a few minutes.
I have a first question for you. Do you need an expanded breakdown of in-kind hours beyond the designated sheet?
I would say no, as long as the hours that you're putting in, all the information has to be there, the CF number, the date, and what you did. That would be sufficient. I don't need like a time card that shows somebody did work on that day.
All right, Ron, the next question is, will this PowerPoint be uploaded as well as the video?
Yes, hopefully sometime next week.
Ron, my next question, is there any changes from SAVE 2020?
Basically, the changes are the forms that we've put, that we've revised. But the grant agreement itself is pretty much the same. I think that the item in Exhibit B, item 10, about providing the contract agreement, that is new. We did it many years ago, but we got rid of it, but now it's back. But other than that, no.
All right, Ron, the next question. Does this grant apply to tenders or dinghies that are abandoned or hazards to navigation?
I don't believe it is to a tender. I believe a tender is something that somebody uses to give people rides back and forth to their boats that sometimes is charged for. I wouldn't call that a recreational vessel, and I wouldn't call a dinghy a recreational vessel. That is something I would also say that if it's something you want to get prior approval to send us an email or a letter with your justification as to why you think it should be included, and we'll consider it.
Ron, I want to jump in there. So dinghies, if they're recreational dinghies from larger vessels being used from larger recreational vessels into like home ports or recreation ports or something, those are definitely recreational vessels and can be removed with this funding. Tenders, though, the commercial activity of a tender and a commercial use of a vessel like that's non-recreational, that would not be. Hopefully that clarifies.
Okay, the next question. Are the new forms currently required for the current grants that are running for us?
I'd like you to use them, but no. I encourage you to use them, but the answer is no.
All right, the next question. Is there a cap on the amount we could apply for?
No.
I want to jump in on that one. We have $2.75 million available in this program. There are about 30, 20, depending on the year, 30 or so grant applicants. Each application needs to be well justified. If there isn't a good justification, then you won't be getting as much money as you're asking for. But if you have a good justification, you've established need, you're working cost effectively, and you're scoring high in all of those different categories that the application reviewers will be reviewing your application on, we're hoping that everyone will get what they need. But if you just ask for a blanket $1 million and can't support that, you won't be getting what you asked for without that necessary support.
Okay, the next question, one of you can probably help me with. If a local agency does not have its own SNHAP, can it piggyback on a county SNHAP?
My meetings. Am I still on with you guys? Okay, I'm back. Looks like I'm back. Maybe I'm not back.
You're here, Ron.
Am I there? Okay.
Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
Okay, because it went across my screen that said it was not responding. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So can somebody piggyback off another SNAP plan? I would think that if you're going to apply, you need to have both your authority for tagging and removing vessels, which would also kind of include your SNAP plan. So if your agency, I know that there are some districts and some other agencies that work with law enforcement to meet their enforcement clause or requirement, that would probably fall under their SNAP plan as well. So I'm going to say yes to that. Karen, would you like to? I think I need your input on this.
My understanding is that each applicant has to have a SNAP plan. So part of this is we don't want crossover for local agencies. For instance, if a county is doing most of the work or doing all of the work in their county, but you're within the county and you're not happy with how they're doing it, for instance, or you have a slightly separate, we don't want conflicting agencies working on conflicting plans with conflicting money. So you will need to have your own SNAP plan. And with that process of developing the SNAP plan, you will evaluate your local, your county's SNAP plan there too, to make sure that you're not getting in each other's way or identifying the same vessels in your application versus their application. Yeah, I believe one of the statutory requirements is that you have a SNAP plan. Each applicant has one.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next question. Can we ask questions during the grant process for any items for clarification or guidance?
Yes.
Okay, another question. Can you explain what SNAP stands for?
Submerged Navigational Hazard Abatement Plan. I believe I said that in the first slide, but I'll say it again.
That looks like all the questions for now, Ron.
Okay. Like I said, if anybody has any other questions, if you think of something later on, tomorrow, whatever, shoot me an email, and I'll answer the questions that you have. Thank you for attending today, and I'm gonna close out the webinar. Thank you.